Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from RAU'S IAS. Do not forget to subscribe to our Telegram channel for all the updates and materials. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC Civil Services Examination. Today we are going to take up Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 21st of May 2021. The articles which we are going to take up have been displayed on your screen, and we are going to begin the discussion with an important announcement. Now all of us understand the importance of optional subject in overall scheme of UPSC Civil Services Examination. And if you're confused about which optional subject to choose, how to find the best teachers and academic support for your optional papers, and above all, how to prepare for the same during these difficult times, RAU'S IAS has best solution for your optional subject related problems. We are conducting optional orientation sessions on 22nd and 29th of May 2021, in which you can learn from the RAU'S IAS teachers about how to prepare for the optional subjects and how are we going to help you in scoring your best in the mains examination. The optional batches are starting from 4th of June 2021 via live online classes. Consider this as a call to all of those who wish to completely cover the optional subject by December 2021. This will ensure timely coverage of optional subject, and then you can focus your attention completely on prelims from January or February 2022 and keep revising the optional subject till you appear for the mains examination. RAU'S IAS is offering guidance for political science, public administration, history, sociology, geography, economics and psychology from Delhi, Jaipur and Bangalore centers. In the description of the video, there is a link which you can use to register yourself for the orientation for the respective optional subject session. We at RAU'S IAS are committed to give you the best guidance and academic support to excel in civil services examination. Join the orientation and kickstart your mains optional subject preparation from a team of best teachers in the arena. Let us now begin the discussion. So the first news which we have taken for today's discussion appears on page number 7. The outdated nature of bureaucracy. The public sector, private players and civil society should all work together for public service delivery. Now in this very small discussion, the author tries to put across a point that Indian bureaucracy is plagued with a lot of issues and challenges. And it's time for us to resolve these issues. Now if you look at GS paper 2 and GS paper 4 syllabus, you will find all these matters written prominently in the syllabus. For example, let's take this GS 2 syllabus. Important aspects of governance, transparency and accountability, e-governance, limitations and potential, citizens charter, transparency, accountability and institutional and other measures. Role of civil services in a democracy. Then under GS paper 4, same things are repeated with different words. You have transparency and accountability in the governance, you have concept of public service, and so it is important for us to first understand the characteristic of bureaucracy, what are the structural and behavioral features of a bureaucracy, and then understand the problems and challenges of bureaucracy, not just the problems but also the solutions to them. And that is exactly what we are going to do. And for all those people who are truly aspiring for mains examination, this is going to be very, very important discussion. Alright, so we will start this discussion from a very, very important and basic perspective, which is about the characteristics of a bureaucracy. What does it take for an organization or group of a collective of a people to be called as a bureaucracy or a group of bureaucrats? And so there needs to be a structural feature as well as behavioral feature in them in order for them to be categorized as a true bureaucrat. Now the structural features are essential, whereas behavioral features are expected from a group of bureaucrats. And so let us discuss them one by one. First is hierarchy. It is a must. So offices and officials are arranged in a hierarchical manner with well-defined roles and responsibility at each level. So generally it is arranged in a form of a pyramid, and as you go higher, the number of people keeps on reducing, which basically shows that at the top level you will have just one person, and in case of Indian bureaucracy it could be a secretary. Now this ensures that the subordinate offices and officials are under the control and authority of higher officials and hence answerable to them for their actions and decisions. So what it basically does is that it removes the ambiguity. You have one person who is in charge of three people who are down in hierarchy, and similar is the case with the people down below in the ranks. So when you have well-defined roles and responsibilities at each level, it obviously means better answerability. And just like hierarchy, you have a clear-cut division of work. The work is divided into different units and allocated to different personnel based upon the principle of specialization. With a single office, we have multiple departments such as we have accounting, technical teams, R&D, human resource development, and so in a bureaucracy also we have a division of work. Then a bureaucracy must have strict adherence to rules and regulations. Now, we will discuss how it becomes problematic, but at some level these strict adherence to rules and regulations is very much required. Because you need to understand that bureaucracy is a part and backbone of executive. They have immense power. They are the ones who are going to implement the laws. And so we need to check the misuse of the powers and to reduce discretionary powers given in the hands of these officials. And so if you want to remove the discretion, you will have to write everything down, and that is nothing but rules and regulation. Then last but not the least is the requirement of competence, which is basically qualifications which are clearly laid down for every job and position. Selection and promotion is based upon the basis of competence of civil servants. Now this is also done to counter a lot of unethical activities, for example, nepotism, favoritism. So even after nepotism and favoritism, if you have laid down strict qualifications for each post and postings, you will ensure a minimum quality of appointment to each and every position. So apart from these structural features which are must, what are the desirable features? What are the behavioral features expected from bureaucracy? And these are 4 important values. First is non-partisanship. Doing one's duty without fear or favor of any political party. This ensures that the government in power enjoys the full support of civil servants. Then the next important behavioral feature expected of a bureaucrat is impartiality, which is about taking decisions which are fair, just, and unbiased. Decisions should not be based upon personal bias, prejudice, or selfish interests. Decisions should maximize public interest and welfare. Then neutrality, of course, is very much required, which is absence of political bias. And then finally, the most important quality or value to have is integrity, which is higher level of coherence between your thought, your speech, and your action. So what you are thinking, you should speak that, and what you are speaking, you should follow them with the action. And when you have exact coherence, you are an integral person. So for example, if a person thinks one thing, speaks something else, or even if he speaks the same thing but does not follow it up with the action, that person is not integral. And that is why this is one of the most important traits to have. And so the civil servant should not only speak what they believe in, but they must also act in the same way. The civil servant should be courageous enough to advise the ministers in a correct decision if they believe that their action decisions are wrong or not. And so just like issues and challenges with our policies and schemes, it's high time that we discuss the problems and challenges of Indian bureaucracy. And so here are 6 main challenges written in black letters. Generalist versus specialist debate, poor accountability, problem in personnel management, problem of coordination, strict adherence to rule is also a problem, and lack of stability of tenure. And we are going to discuss each of these challenges and issues one by one. We are going to understand why it is a problem and what are the solutions, and these solutions are written in blue color. And starting with lack of stability of tenure, because this is one thing which all of us read in the newspaper every time. Whenever there is a change in the government in some state, there is mass transfer of civil servants on the basis of a lot of factors, which it also includes caste, religion, and monetary benefits considerations, leading to demoralization and division of bureaucracy on the basis of caste and religion. Now, the lack of stability of tenure has led to a number of secondary problems, such as politicization of bureaucracy, where the bureaucrats and IAS officers openly and actively favor one political party over another. Then you have higher level of corruption, because if the leaders or if the ministers have power to transfer all the bureaucrats, then they are going to also misuse this power. And so that is why second ARC as well as Hota committee has recommended a statutory civil services board, which will be set up as an independent and autonomous service board to decide on all matters related to posting and transfers. So if the powers of posting and transfer are taken away from ministers, then obviously we are going to have less of a politicization and lesser degree of corruption. But of course, then also we are going to have up to some extent of these parameters, but still not at the levels which exist right now. Then as we have seen that one of the basic features of a bureaucracy is its strict adherence to rules. It is very, very much required because you are giving a lot of power to district magistrate, to superintendent of police. And if you do not bind them in rules, they are going to behave like monarchs. They are going to behave like authoritarian rulers. And so you need a lot of rules. But what has happened is that we have instituted very, very strict adherence to rules, and we have at the same time not provided emotional intelligence to our bureaucrats. And we have laid such a high emphasis on following of procedures, rules and regulations that it seems like the purpose is defeated. Because these procedures were a means to achieve an end, and that end was the benefit of the citizen of our country, the betterment of our rural society, the upliftment of below poverty line people, because of which these procedures were made. But rather than that, it seems like procedures themselves have become an end. Apart from that, multiple levels of hierarchy in the government offices lead to delay in decision making, red tapeism, and provide scope for speed money. And so the best example of this would be problem faced by protagonist Musaddi Lal in the government offices in the famous TV series Office, where Musaddi Lal is left with no choice but to go to n number of places to get the documents signed. So what is the solution for this? So of course, you need to simplify the rules, you need to change the rules with changing time. There is a need for single window clearance mechanism so that a person can get to one place and get all the documents approved, authorized or permitted. Then we need time-bound delivery of services. So what problems do citizens and people face is that when they go to a government office, there is an indefinite delay because there is no obligation on behalf of the government servant to furnish the details or achieve the desired result. And so that is why since last 1 or 2 decades, there has been a massive movement to enact a statutory provision which will bind each and every civil servant. So for example, if you apply for driving license, there has to be a limit, for example, n number of days within which either you should get a no or you should get a yes. If you get a no, you should know the reason why you have been denied driving license. And if you don't get a no, you should get the driving license. And if you are not getting that within the time frame stipulated, then there should be a legal action against the authority. So this will obviously instill quite a fear in the government departments. Then of course you need citizens charters, which is basically a document that outlines the service commitments of an organization to its people. Of course, it is in practice now, but there are a lot of loopholes in the way we are carrying out our citizen charter exercises, which already has been discussed in our earlier DNS. Then we have a problem of coordination and collaboration within and among the government departments. Because excessive division of work based upon the principle of specialization has led to lack of unified approach of policy. Consider this, in the field of energy, you have Ministry of Coal, Ministry of Power, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and Department of Atomic Energy. So just a simple field dealing with energy and power, you have 4 different ministries. And so the creation of multiple ministries and departments wherein each ministry department tries to maximize its own interests actually goes against the need to adopt a unified and integrated energy policy. And that is why you will have merging of department with overlapping functions. You will have to do that. Government is doing that. Some of the ministries and departments have already been merged. Let us know in the comment section which are those departments and ministries. Alright, so after having discussed these 3 challenges, let us now discuss the remaining 3, starting with generalist versus specialist. So it is often argued that IAS or Indian Administrative Services is a generalist service and does not have a special knowledge or expertise in a particular field. In spite of that, most of the department, including the technical departments, have come to be headed by IAS officers. Now this seems quite anomalous that a generalist issues orders that are required to be followed by specialists in such departments. For example, the Central Board of Direct Taxes is always headed by an IAS officer, and she commands all the Indian Revenue Services income tax officials. Similar is the case with the telecom sector also. On the other hand, it is being argued that generalists are specialists in the field of administration. So a journalist IAS officer who has been DM for 10 to 12 years, then a secretary, is not a specialist in technical knowledge, but is a specialist of administration. So administration, if considered as a field, as a specialization, then that person is a specialized person of administration. And being generalist, they can look at an issue in much more broader sense than a specialist. Moreover, an IAS officer would have risen from the lowest level of district collector to highest level of secretary, and would have worked in multiple departments and ministries, and hence would be in a best position to understand the ground realities. And so even the ARC has recommended the importance of both journalist as well as specialist. We need both journalist and specialist, but more than that, we need generalist becoming specialist as they climb up the ladder. So we need the administrative experience of a DM. We need her better understanding of the ground realities. But at some point of time, we would expect Tina Dubby to take either of the fields, be it health, be it education, be it telecom, be it energy. We would expect her to take one of the field and then spend rest of her bureaucratic career in that particular field. So in that way, she will definitely have 10 to 12 years of ground experience, and then of course in combination with that, she will have specialized knowledge as well. But what we don't want is that people, after graduating from district magistrate post, going into joint secretary level and then getting transferred from health to education to telecom to energy, and then ending up as pure journalist, not having a specialized knowledge of any particular field. And so that is why there is a need for each and every bureaucrat to select a specialized domain after few years in service. They could be general administration, urban development, rural development, human resource, health, education, and they could be anything. So this is about a debate of journalist versus specialist. But then you have a grave matter of poor accountability when it comes to bureaucracy, and this is a problem which everyone is aware of. So the civil servants are generally accountable within the government to the parliament, to the judiciary, CAG, CVC, Lokayukt. All this is an internal accountability mechanism. Then they are mostly accountable for following rules and regulations, and these are called procedural accountability. If a district magistrate is following what has been written in the rules, it's fine. No one else can question him or her. And so there is a clear-cut lack of external accountability. And so we need to strengthen external accountability to the entities outside the government, such as people, civil society organizations, media. And we have various tools. We have Citizens Charter, we have RTI, we have service delivery surveys, but we need to institutionalize these mechanisms so that the external accountability mechanisms become strong. And we need to strengthen accountabilities to outcomes. Now, what does this mean? This means that if, let's say, there is a scheme called MG Narega, which is about providing employment in rural areas, there needs to be a survey after every year or every 2 years, and there needs to be a clear-cut laid down white paper to demonstrate in each and every district how many people have got jobs, because it was guaranteed 100 days of job to every willing participant. But right now what we have is accountability to procedure. Manrega funds come to your district, you distribute them, that's over, because you followed the procedure. No one is going to ask you how many people actually got the job because of the disbursement of the funds to each and every village panchayats. And so that is what we need in India right now, your accountability to outcomes. And finally, we need to have proper personnel management. It's not personal as an individual management, rather it is about management of the people in the bureaucracy itself, which basically has to do with how much updated they are, whether they are honing their skills while in the services or not, whether they just burn their night owl before the civil services examination, but once they were selected, they are not doing anything to enhance their knowledge, experience, or any kind of hobby. And so that is why you need mid-career training sessions, because it is often felt that once admitted into service, it's just like a tunnel. You do the basic course and then out of the service you get retired. There is no mid-term or mid-career enhancement in your qualification. Then a lot of reports, including the ARC, have recommended abolition of Article 311, because Article 311 protects honest civil servants from dismissal from the service. Under this article, civil servants cannot be removed or dismissed or reduced in rank unless he or she has been given a reasonable opportunity to be heard. However, some of the experts have actually pointed out that the provision has actually made it difficult for the government to remove the unfit and inefficient civil servant. And so that is why this provision needs to go in the current framework of Indian democracy. And then finally, you need 360-degree performance appraisal. So performance appraisal is already going on. It's a mechanism of the government of India to track the progress of each bureaucrat. But what now we need is a 360 degree. So there's a person A who has 3 juniors, 2 colleagues and 1 seniors to which she reports. And 360-degree performance appraisal is about taking the review of A from not just seniors, which was the case earlier, but also from the colleagues as well as from the juniors. That is the full perspective which shall be arrived. That is the kind of perspective we need to look into for A to get promoted. So this is a very, very important topic from the perspective of mains examination. And this discussion is sufficient as far as problems and challenges of Indian bureaucracy is concerned. Let us now move on to the next news. This next article which we are going to discuss appears as a column on page number 6, the Circumvention. So recently, Prime Minister Narendra Modi held 2 virtual meetings back to back with state officials and district magistrates. And now this has created a problem. This has created a problem with the overall structure in which the India's governance is divided. We have a central government at the center, then we have state governments, and under state government comes the district officials. But circumventing the state level, the central government or the Prime Minister is directly interacting with the root level of the governance in our country, and this has not gone down well with a lot of state governments. Now the question arises that states are more or less an autonomous body in themselves, and so why they are not obligated to follow the directions of the central government. And so if the Prime Minister issues order to the district magistrates can simply deny them by saying that we do not have the state government's permission, but it is not happening. Even the opposition state officers have taken part in the meeting conducted by the Prime Minister. And what is the reason behind that? And the reason behind that lies in 3 or 4 very critical articles of our constitution. Article 256 and Article 257 and Article 365 and Article 356. And so through this discussion, we will understand how they form a triad in themselves. Article 256 enables the central government to order the state governments to carry out a lot of functions. If they deny, it would mean that the condition has arisen where the state government cannot be carried out according to the provisions of the Constitution of India, which would definitely satisfy the condition given in Article 356. As far as the removal of the state government and application of the President rule is concerned. And so let us now begin the discussion. Alright, so articles right now in focus are Article number 256 and Article number 257. And both come under the chapter of administrative relations under the part 11 of the Constitution of India, which deals with the relations between union and the states. Now, before going into understanding the provision of these articles, we need to understand why the constitution makers devised this kind of mechanism which provides for enforcement of laws by the center to the states. Basically, what it talks about is that when center creates a law and wants the state to implement them, states have no other option but to implement these laws. Now, the obvious confusion is that since India is a federal state, it's a federation. And so you have separate central list, separate state list, and then you have a concurrent list. And so where is the need for such a mechanism? Now, there are 2 things over here. First is that you should understand that while the center commands expansive powers, it has limited personnel to administer them. Only in some sector has the union government established its own machinery. For example, in defense, in foreign affairs, empowering it both to enact as well as enforce laws by themselves. But in most other fields, it's the state governments which have the machinery to enforce the laws. Without their cooperation, center cannot achieve anything, especially in matters of concurrent list. And so that is why these mechanisms have been provided, so that when the center wants to achieve something and if it is able to enact a law, which means that it's in its own right to enact such a law, it should get the full cooperation from the states either willingly or forcibly. And apart from that, you should always remember that India is a federation but tilted in favor of unitary system, which means that there are few provisions here and there which empower the central government more than the states combined, and this is also one of those provisions. And we shall see how, in combination with Article 356 and 365, this triad of 256, 356 and 365 is quite deadly mechanism. So starting with Article 256, which talks about the obligation of the states in the Union, it says that the executive power of every state shall be so exercised as to ensure compliance with the laws made by the Parliament. So the functioning of the states can never go against the laws made by the Parliament. That is one condition. And the executive power of the Union shall extend to giving such directions to the state as may appear to the Government of India necessary for that purpose. There are two provisions of this particular article. First is that the state shall function in a manner that it is not going to confront or diverge from the overall laws being created or enacted by the Parliament. That is one. But if there is a condition, the center can issue directions to the state to come on track and follow or function in a manner which is in overall convergence with the laws made by the Parliament. So this mechanism directly deals with the laws made by the Parliament. What about the executive orders? And for that you have Article 257, which talks about the control of Union over the states in certain cases. And so what are these cases? First is, of course, again, just like the states have to behave and function in a manner that it does not confront with the laws made by the Parliament, their executive power also have to be carried out in such a way that they do not impede or go against the executive power of the Union. And just like before, if a union government feels that the state's executive power or the acting on such executive power is going against the union government, they can issue directions for the state to follow the same. So now it is clear that neither legislative nor executive actions or orders emanating from the central government or from the center can be ignored by the state. They cannot be ignored by the states. And here nowhere it is written that what are the costs which can be imposed by the center if states do not follow, because that is dealt within the provisions of Article 356 and 365, which we are going to look into. But before that, there are certain other provisions also where the states have to follow the center guidelines. The executive power of the Union shall extend to the giving of directions to a state as to the construction and maintenance of means of communication declared in the direction to be of national or military importance. So for example, if there is a broadband cable passing through a particular state, and if the center issues direction, it shall be the duty of that particular state to protect that data cable. Then similarly, the executive power of the Union shall extend to giving of directions to the state as to the measures to be taken for the protection of railways in the state. So as we have seen that railway belongs to the central list. So it is the overall responsibility of the center, but the protection of the properties of the railways will be done by the state governments. And the constitution also provides for the reimbursements or for payment of whatever expenses which have been incurred by the state in carrying out the above function. So this is very, very important. So it's basically like you have provided for a mechanism through which the central government can impose a lot of responsibility on the states, and states have no other option but to carry them out. And so this could be one of the ways through which the central government would just shed all the responsibility on the states, right? And so that is why the constitution has also provided for a mechanism through which not only the responsibilities will be given by the central government, but also the cost of it will be borne by the central government. And so whatever the cost which has been imposed by the center, which has been allocated to the states through using the mechanisms of Article 257, will be borne by the central government. And so usually what happens is that the states and the central governments arrive on a consensus as to what should be the cost, but in case they have a dispute, it shall be settled by an arbiter appointed by the Chief Justice of India. This also has been given under the provisions of Article 257. Alright, so far we have understood that central government under various provisions have power to give instruction to the states and they have to follow it. But what if they don't follow? What if a state denies carrying out of NRC or CEA in their state? What will happen? What solution does center have in those kinds of situations? And so specifically for these situations, the provision of Article 365 has been created. So Article 365 is a very important article in our constitution, because it stipulates that if a state do not comply with or give effect to central decisions, the president of the country may hold that a situation has arisen in which the government of the state cannot be carried on in accordance with the provisions of the constitution. So far under Article 256 and 257, what you had were that the central can give orders. Now what Article 365 says is that if you don't follow these orders, the president can say, now the situation has arisen in which the government of a state cannot be carried out in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution of India. And then you have Article 356, which authorizes the president to remove the state government from office and dissolve state assemblies if they cannot be run in accordance to the provisions of the Constitution of India. So orders under 256, 257, if orders are not followed, would imply the provisions of the Constitution of India are not being followed, and then Article 356 would mean the application of precedent rule. And so now you can easily see that Article 256, 365 and 356 are a kind of triad. One alerts, another is warns, and then finally the Article 356 strikes. So the next news which we are going to take up appears on page number 6, the fault line of poor health infrastructure. According to the author, as the second wave rages on in our country, a lot of bitter truths and fault lines have been exposed as far as the health infrastructure of our country is concerned. And then in the whole editorial, she goes on and talks about a lot of issues with our health infrastructure. And so she talks about high out-of-pocket expenditure on behalf of the citizens. She talks about massive inequality or inequity among the states when it comes to the health parameters. And she also talks about the stark differences among the states as far as per capita expenditure on health is concerned. And this is important because under GS paper 2, under governance section, UPSC expects us to know issues relating to development and management of social sector, services related to health, education and human resources. So clearly you are expected to know the issues related to health. And the recent economic survey has a chapter which was dedicated completely and solely on the health issues in our country. So this discussion has been taken from there. Do listen and try to assimilate the important issues. So we all know that recent COVID-19 pandemic has emphasized the importance of the healthcare sector and its linkage with other key sectors of the economy. And we know that health of a nation depends critically on its citizens having access to an equitable, affordable and accountable healthcare system. Better health is directly reflected in the better economic growth of a country through labor productivity, declined economic burden of illness. So for example, a World Health Organization report has said that increasing life expectancy from 50 to 70 years could raise the economic growth by 1.4 percentage points per year. So these are just the economic reasons for improving the health of the economy. Of course, because this is an economic survey. But the better health of each and every individual is an end in itself and not a means to achieve something. And so a whole chapter of economic survey is dedicated to current state of affairs of India's healthcare. And it has highlighted the current issues which are plaguing India's healthcare system. And let us understand them one by one. First and foremost is, of course, India's health outcomes are very poor. As you can see, despite improvements in maternal mortality and infant mortality rate, India still needs to improve significantly on these matrices. Countries such as China, Bangladesh, Bhutan and Cambodia have improved much more in the same period of time than India. And these are just few of the indicators which we have taken. Then, India is still marred by the fact that the access to the health services and its utilization is very low in India. So hospitalization rates in India are 3 to 4%, which are among the lowest in the world. Now the same statistics for a middle income country is about 8 to 9%, and for OECD countries it is about 15 to 17%. The India is observing very high out of pocket expenditures. And as you can see in the figure, India has one of the highest levels of out of pocket expenditure in the world. If you compare, India is placed right beside Bangladesh, whereas other countries which are emerging economies, for example China and Thailand, there the amount of money which people have to shell out for hospitalization and other medical purposes is very low, and that is mainly because of low budgetary allocations for healthcare, or in other words, low public spending in health systems. We know that health is a state subject in India, and if you look at India's overall state-wise distribution of spending on healthcare, it varies drastically, and so there is a vast amount of disparity in the overall spending across India, and so that is reflected in the out-of-pocket expenditure of people belonging to various states as well. So as you can see on your screen, this graph denotes on y-axis the out-of-pocket expenditure and on the x-axis per capita state health expenditure. And so if you see, the states like Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram spend a lot of amount on health, and so that is why the out-of-pocket expenditure in these states are very low. Then we have a problem of very low human resource for health, because health status of any country crucially depends on the available health infrastructure in general and human resource for health in particular. And again, just like low budgetary allocation for healthcare is dependent on the state efforts, the low human resource for health has also a state bias in it. And so the diagram which you see on your screen shows that only Kerala is a state which has adequate amount of human resource for health. Rest each and every state can be categorized into less than adequate density and less than minimum density, and most of the states in India have less than minimum density of human resource in our country. And so this also, being a state subject, has a disparity which can be explained from the point of view of state efforts. And then finally, we have a problem of unregulated private sector in healthcare, which is marked by high market failure. Now, private healthcare is important because while the share of public institutions has increased both in the number of hospitals as well as number of outpatient cares, the private sector dominates in total healthcare provision in India. And around 74% of outpatient care and 65% of overall hospitalization care is being provided through the private sector in urban India. And if you compare the cost of treatment between public and private sector for the same kind of disease, as you can see on the screen, there is a vast difference. And if you plot the same data on a state-wise and a city-wise manner, there is also a stark difference. And so that is why there is a need for a regulation. So these are the major issues plaguing our health sector. And so what is a saliency bias? Now, saliency bias is the bias of the policymakers to design the future course of action based on a recent phenomena. And so recent phenomena, which is a communicable disease, and the pandemic of this level is unlikely to strike within few years or maybe decades. And if we are able to address these issues highlighted in the economic survey, we will be better prepared to handle even these kinds of pandemic. But as the country is going through demographic transitions, there are few trends which are clearly visible, and that is the proportion of communicable and non-communicable diseases are changing in our society. So what you see on the screen is a percentage of all deaths plotted against the number of years. And so this line in the red is the number of deaths caused due to communicable maternal, neonatal and nutritional diseases. And this line in black color or dark brown color shows the number of deaths caused due to non-communicable diseases, and you can see by 2020 this forms the major share of overall deaths. And so the focus of health system of India needs to focus on non-communicable diseases, because if you leave 2020 aside, this is going to cause around 60% of overall deaths in India in future, and this is increasing. And if you break down the deaths caused due to each and every disease, if you look in 2019, the number one killer was heart disease. That has retained its position of number one. But in 2009, the disease which killed most number of people after heart disease was diarrheal disease, which is related to sanitation and infection, which is kind of communicable, has dropped down to the fourth number. Similarly, neonatal disorders have dropped down to 5th level, whereas COPD and deaths due to stroke have risen to 2, 3. So if you look, all top 3 killers are non-communicable in nature. And so that is why the economic survey lays very high emphasis on increasing public spending on health from 1% to at least 2.5% of the GDP. Increasing government spending on health has direct impact on life expectancy. And so these dots which you see on your screen are countries. And so higher the public expenditure, higher is the expectancy rate. And India is placed over here. Similarly, using the data, they also show that increasing public spending on health has negative correlation with maternal mortality rate. Higher the public spending on health, lower will be the mortality rate. Sri Lanka Parliament passes bill on China-backed port city appears on page number 11. So the Sri Lankan Parliament has passed a controversial bill on laws governing Chinese-backed Colombo port city. So Colombo Port City is Chinese-funded tax-free enclave and international finance center built as Sri Lanka's answer to Dubai and Singapore. The proposed legislation, which is known by the name of Colombo Port City Economic Commission Bill, will govern the new Colombo Port City. Under this law, the port city will be administered by a commission with unprecedented powers to fast-track investment approvals. Many laws of the parliament would not apply to the port city. And so you can see clearly that this is some kind of exceptional treatment being handed over to the Chinese controlled region of Sri Lanka. And so the opposition parties and civil society groups challenged the law, claiming that it would infringe upon the country's sovereignty and would create a Chinese enclave in Sri Lanka. And so this has obviously raised a lot of eyebrows in our country, India, because India is concerned. India is concerned because of increased presence of China in South Asia and Indian Ocean region. And now let's have a look at all the Chinese presence in our surrounding. So under the Chinese-Myanmar Economic Corridor project, China is going to develop deep sea port Kyaukphyu and construct a railway line from China's border to Mandalay. This will shorten the route for its oil and gas imports from the Persian Gulf and reduce its dependency on Malacca Strait. Then China funded development of Chittagong port of Bangladesh and has already signed a deal to develop Mongla port. However, Bangladesh cancelled a plan to develop a deep sea port at Sonadia Island with China after receiving objections from India. This island is very close to Andaman and Nicobar. Then China's partnership with Pakistan is not hidden from everyone. It is higher than the Himalayas and deeper than the ocean, which also includes development of Gwadar port, which is now fully functional, and along with that China-Pakistan economic corridor, on which a lot of DNS have been done. Then with Maldives, which allowed China to build an observation post at Makundu, and then development of an overseas military base in Djibouti. And so this presence of China, or rather the over-presence of China in Indian Ocean region, gives credence to the string of pearls theory. So what is it? It refers to a geopolitical theory to the network of Chinese intentions in Indian Ocean region. It refers to the network of Chinese military and commercial facilities developed by China in countries falling on the Indian Ocean between the Chinese mainland and Port of Sudan. So starting with Gwadar in Pakistan, then a base in Maldives, then Hambantota and Colombo in Sri Lanka, then developing a port in Bangladesh, Myanmar, as well as in Thailand. So now you can clearly see that China is kind of engulfing India from all sides with its presence all over. So the string of pearls is a well-known phenomena, and we know that it exists since at least 1 or 2 decades. So what has India done in order to counter the increasing Chinese influence in Indian Ocean region? And so India has taken a lot of policy steps to counter Chinese influence, starting with regional connectivity initiatives like BBIN Motor Vehicle Agreement or Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, IMT Trilateral Highway, Indo-Bangladesh Protocol on Inland Water Transit Trade, Kaladan Multimodal Transit Transport Project. You increase the connectivity, you increase the trade, and hence the confidence, and that is the reason behind India signing so many transport and trade agreements with its neighbors. Then India has offered currency swap arrangements for SAARC, under which RBI extended currency swap arrangement to SAARC countries to avoid balance of payment crisis in their countries. It especially benefited Sri Lanka and Maldives, whose economies faced crisis because of heavy borrowing from China. Then India is trying to become a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. And it starts by development of naval bases at various places. So India signed a deal with Singapore to expand existing Indian access to Changi Naval Base. India has offered to develop military infrastructure on the Agaliga island of Mauritius, and it seeks to develop naval infrastructure on the Assumption Island of Seychelles. Then India is carrying out a lot of joint defense exercises in this region, for example, Malabar exercises and Ikurvin exercises. Let us know in the comment section what are the countries involved in these defense exercises. Then India has actively participated in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations in this region. And the best example would be Operation Sahayata and Operation Vanilla. And then India is actively participating in the regional groupings like Indian Ocean Rim Association, IORA, IONS, Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, Indian Ocean Commission, IOC, to address the common concerns and play a leadership role in the region. So you can see that although the increasing influence of China in the Indian Ocean region is a cause of concern for us, but still India has evolved and India has devised a lot of policy decisions and mechanisms to counter this increasing threat from China. Let us now move on to the next news. The next news which we have taken appears on page number 11. World's largest iceberg breaks off from Antarctica, says ESA. So a huge ice block has broken off from western Antarctica into the Weddell Sea, becoming the largest iceberg in the world and earning the name A76 as you can see on the screen. And so it is the latest in a series of large ice blocks to dislodge in a region acutely vulnerable to climate change, although scientists said in the case it appeared to be a part of natural polar cycle. This of course becomes very important from the perspective of prelims examination as far as the map location goes. Because just like other important seas and oceans, Southern Ocean or Antarctica is very important. And as you can see, the Weddell Sea we are talking about is this one, in which this particular new ice block is floating right now. But apart from that, you have a lot of other seas. For example, Ross Sea, D'Urville Sea, Mawson Sea, Davis Sea, Cooperation Sea and Cosmonaut Sea. So these are the important seas in the Southern Ocean. But from the perspective of mains examination also, this is very important. As you know that there is a line in the syllabus of GS paper 1, important geophysical phenomena such as earthquakes, tsunami, volcanic activity, cyclones, geographical features and their location, changes in critical geographical features including water bodies and ice caps forms an important part of the syllabus. And you can see when a significant chunk of iceberg or ice shelf separates itself from the main body and goes into the ocean, it is important for that very particular reason because it is connected with climate change. And that has been indeed substantiated in IPCC's special report on the oceans and cryosphere in changing climate, or acronymed as SROCC 2019. And the graphs which you are seeing on your screen are Greenland ice sheet loss and Antarctic ice sheet mass loss. And as you can see, that so far the trend is increasing, and if the same trend continues, if the climate change and the global warming continues at the rate it is continuing right now, it is going to result in disproportionate amount of loss of ice sheet. Between 2006 and 2015, the Greenland ice sheet lost ice mass at an average rate of 278 billion tons every year, while the Antarctic ice sheet lost a mass of around 155 billion tons on an average every year. Snow over areas outside of these two regions, like the glaciers in Himalayas, together lost on an average 220 billion tons of ice every year. For example, in Himalayas, glaciers feeding 10 rivers including Ganges and Yangtze could shrink dramatically if emissions do not fall, hitting water supplies across swath of Asia. So although in this particular case, it could be that this is a normal phenomena, but nonetheless a lot of part and chunk of ice is breaking away, not just from glaciers, but also from ice shelves and ice caps. Let us now move on to the next news. declare mucormycosis as an epidemic, sent to states appear on page number 1. So the union government has asked the state governments to declare this fungal disease as pandemic. And so in a communication to states, Joint Secretary of Health and Family Welfare Ministry, Mr. Love Agrawal, said declaring the black fungus infection increasingly seen in COVID-19 patients as an epidemic would lead to health facilities screening for it and reporting all such cases to the government. And so, in this particular discussion, we are going to understand two important things. What is this fungal disease and how notifying it as an epidemic is going to help us. So, starting with what is mucormycosis. So it is a very, very rare infection. It is caused by exposure to mucor mold, which is commonly found in soil, plants, manure, and decaying fruits and vegetables. And so now you can easily understand that all of us are exposed to this particular mold all the time. So we cannot escape it, but we are not infected by it because of our good immunity. Because most of the times we maintain our strong defense mechanism against this particular disease. So now you can easily understand it is ubiquitous, which means that it is found across all the habitats in our surrounding. And as far as which body part it infects sinus, brain, lungs, and can be life-threatening in diabetic or severely immunocompromised individuals such as HIV patients and cancer patients. So we are surrounded by it, but we are not getting infected because of our strong immune system. But as soon as there is some condition in our body, for example, diabetes, uncontrolled blood sugar, or HIV which has turned itself into AIDS, or cancer, then the person's immune system is compromised and then this mold starts to take over the body. And so now why we are having increased cases of black fungus in the aftermath of COVID-19 pandemic, and that is because of two important reasons. First is that COVID-19 already leads to a lot of toll on your body's immune system. And in the treatment of COVID-19, a lot of patients are administered heavy steroids, which are very important life-saving treatment, but it somehow leads to increasing black fungus which has been observed. Apart from that, COVID-19 patients who have severe diabetes are on higher risk of fungal infection. So now we have understood what this black fungus is. But why is central government advising the state governments to notify it as an epidemic? How is it going to help? So once a disease is notified under Epidemic Disease Act 1897, all government and private health facilities, medical colleges will have to follow the guidelines for screening, diagnosis, management of this particular disease. And it will make it mandatory for all these facilities to report all suspected as well as confirmed cases to the health department through district level chief medical officer and subsequently to integrated disease surveillance program surveillance system. So now you can understand what is the significance of notifying a disease as an epidemic. Because if you want to control a disease, you should first know about its occurrence rate. You should know which are the areas which are more infected with it. And for that you need the people, you need the medical department to report these occurrences, these cases. And that is why it is important to notify a disease as an epidemic, because then it becomes a duty of the health officials, not just government but also private, to report the suspected and confirmed cases of these disease. Let us now move on to the next news. The next article which we have taken appears on page number 9. China completes Tibet highway. So the China has completed the construction of a strategic highway through the Brahmaputra Canyon, which is slated to be the world's deepest, and it is very, very close to Arunachal Pradesh border, as you can see over here. So we know that the parent stream of Brahmaputra river is known as Yarlung Zangbo river, which comes from Tibet. And Yarlung Zangbo Grand Canyon is the world's deepest gorge with a maximum depth of more than 6,000 meters. Now this particular highway connects Pad Township in the city of Nyangchi and Medoc County, cutting travel time by around 8 hours. Now this construction is a part of wider infrastructure push in the border areas in Tibet. In November, China began work on strategically important railway line, its second major rail link to Tibet after Qinghai Tibet Railway that opened in 2006. And this is also one of the locations where China is planning a series of dams to stop the flow of the river into our country and to harness it for their own benefit. So as more and more information flows in, we are going to discuss it further.